I don't know why talking about money is so taboo. We're going to teach you how to do market research, how to negotiate your salary. We're really excited to talk about this topic and give our audience really actionable insights to go home with.
So at this time, I'd like to welcome Hannah Williams to the stage.
That's the hardest part of this. Okay, we got it over with. Hi, everybody. Whose first time is it coming to this Capital One Café today? Our first time. Amazing. Okay, so you all can see how great this place is. I'm so glad we all can experience it together. Hi, everybody. I'm guessing a lot of you know who I am. My name is Hannah. This is my amazing fiance, James. He gave me a great intro. I am so excited to be chatting with you all today about market research and really just how to advocate for yourself. So, one of the things that when we first started this page, Boston was actually one of our first cities. So we're actually really excited to be back. We were doing interviews downtown today, and I was wearing my bright green hoodie, and some guy thought we were doing interviews for the Celtics. So great timing, playoff game tonight. Let's go Celts. But yeah, let's get right into it so we don't take up too much time. Make sure if you guys wrote questions, we're gonna get to that at the end. If you have any other questions that you couldn't fit on the page or that we don't answer, if we have time, raise your hand. Okay, we'll try to get through everything. All right, let's get into it. So we want to kind of start with a little bit of a background about who we are so you kind of understand where we're coming from and how we got here. Go ahead, James.
All right, so to start, once again, my name is James Daniels. Originally started my career as a United States Marine. I did 4 years as a diesel engine technician working on vehicles. My last 4 years was doing information operations planning for the Marine Corps. And that's pretty much just propaganda. That's it. But after I left the Marine Corps, I actually started contracting with the government, with the U.S. Army, doing information operations planning for them right before I quit to do this with this lovely lady.
How much were you making, James?
At the end of my term, that's what I'll call it, I was making $112,000 a year.
And I was also a government contractor. We're from DC, so government, very common, contracting, consulting, all of that. I was actually a data analyst. So before I quit to start Salary Transparency, I was a senior data analyst. I had about 3 years of experience, and I was making $115,000 a year. But that's not what I started at, and that kind of segues into our first point, why we started Salary Transparency. So before we had 2 million plus followers and major media mentions, I actually found out that I was underpaid. Way before Salary Transparency existed, I was making $90,000 a year at this new job I accepted as a senior data analyst, and basically within a month, James, he witnessed the worst of the worst.
I got to see it all.
Everything changed for me in a role that I accepted within a month. So, contract speak, my only other colleague on my team was reallocated, basically fired, but we're gonna say reallocated. And overnight, my workload doubled. I had accepted a role on a team, and now I was independent. I was leading analytics for 6 different communications teams. Really rocked my world because I was excited about my job. I loved what I was doing. I hadn't signed on to do double the work, and I was making $90,000 a year. 23 years old, 22 years old, I thought I was killing it. That's hands in the air. Who'd be happy with that salary? I don't see many hands. Okay, good, because I was underpaid. So I actually, a couple months into the role, I started getting really burnt out. I was working before the sun had risen. I was working after the sun had set, and I was like, this is too much. I should definitely be an executive with the amount of work I'm doing, the positives that I bring to the contract, all of that. So I started to wonder, am I fairly paid? And Google let me down. I Googled, how much should a senior data analyst in Washington, D.C. make? I went 3 pages deep in Google, and every single site that I looked at told me I was underpaid about $20,000 for my role. Why was I underpaid? Because up until that point, I had not known about market research. I didn't know that you could even negotiate your salary. That's not something that I was taught in school. And I'm going to shout it out, but I went to Georgetown. I went to a really good school. I had great parents. You know, I didn't have anything that should have held me back. And somehow I had lost $20,000 just because I didn't know about this information. And so that really motivated me to share what I had learned. And I started a page. What was it called, James?
Salary Transparent Street.
Started a page, had this idea, let's normalize talking about pay. Because if we can normalize it and have these conversations, we can glean so much value from one another. We can learn how to do market research. What salary negotiation tips and tools worked for you? Maybe I can try it. Talking about money is so valuable, and it'll help a lot of people realize what their market worth is, and they're probably not making it. The majority of people, I would say, are not making their market rate right now, and so that's why we put this workshop together for you guys to talk about it. But really quickly, I want to talk about why salary transparency is so important, and really like what drove me to ask strangers on the street how much they make. We know about a gender pay gap. It's about 83 cents for women on average. I actually saw that there is a Massachusetts pay gap specific to your state. It's 61 cents for Black women and 50 cents for Latino women, probably much less for Native and Alaska Indian. So there's a major problem with pay gaps in the country, in the world. But not only that, you know, we're not just looking at uncontrolled pay gaps. We're also looking at pay gaps for people in the same job field. Like if you're in the same career as someone else, there is a pay gap that still exists. So it's not like teachers are making X and the president makes X. It exists throughout. And a lot of that comes from pay secrecy. So this is a huge reason for why we talk about what we do. Really, the biggest point to me is that a lot of people cannot explain why they make what they make. Like their managers don't explain it to them. You kind of just get a number on a piece of paper and you say, that sounds great, I'll take that. You never talk about it again. We need to structure salaries. Salaries need to have a very clear minimum and maximum range. You have to be able to understand why you're making what you make. And so pay transparency is a great solution for that. We're gonna do a little bit of interaction with you all because, you know, we talk to strangers. This is the name of the game. So we're gonna do a couple polls throughout. Raise your hand. We're gonna do a couple shout outs later on. The first one is, do you know your market rate? Raise a hand. This is gonna be fun. Okay. All right. So your market rate is very simple. It's literally just the minimum and maximum range that you should be making. And James mentioned it earlier. We have a free market research guide. It's on that scan downloadable thing. Please feel free to take notes. If you have any questions, you missed something, we moved too fast, everything you need is on that guide. So, and it has way more than we're gonna cover. So just letting you know. Your market rate is very simple, X to X. It's the minimum and the maximum range. What factors contribute to your market rate? Like what could cause you to earn more or less? Location, where you live, your education, if you have a master's degree versus a bachelor's or an associate's, the skills you have specific, they can be technical, they can be soft skills. Usually technical skills will cause you to earn a little bit more. Years of experience, that's direct and indirect. So how much in your career field specifically, indirect, how long have you been working total, that's also important. And then company size and location. I think this is one that really gets missed out. If you work for Microsoft, they have a lot more budget than a really small mom and pop shop. You can be a data scientist at both. One will have less budget to give you for the role. So it's really just a personal preference and what you're willing to settle for, what you're looking for, what your goals are. Personally, I loved working for a small company. I didn't like working for a big company.
Same goes for me. My small company, they were completely pay transparent as well as provided a lot of great opportunities, and then they were a lot more personable because it was such a small company.
They also gave you all-inclusive health care, which
Correct.
is crazy. You should have stayed. What did you do? A couple tips and tricks for this to keep in mind. You want to consult at least 3 to 5 different sources to get your rate. So as much as we pitch Indeed, don't use them as your sole purpose, like your sole source. You want to consult 3 to 5. PayScale, Glassdoor, Indeed, Salary.com, very obvious one. anything, go 3 pages deep into your Google and try to find what works best for you. There's certain sites like levels.fyi, Blind, that are very tech focused, and there's a bunch of other salary ranges, or databases out there that are specific to a field. So be specific in your Google search, find those sources, and make sure you're consulting at least 3 to 5. The second one is a big question we get. How big should my range be? And it's really interesting because we are seeing good faith pay ranges in New York City have like 100K difference. That's not at all what we're looking for. We want a 20K difference. You don't want it to be too crazy, but you want it to be really realistic to what you make. And keep in mind that the highest end of that salary is really what you're rooting for. So don't discount yourself. Don't go low because you're like, they're not going to accept that. That's why you have a range. Make sure that the number, at least in the middle, is something that you're really happy with, that you'd be satisfied any job, that's the salary you'd accept. The highest is like the thing you dream of. The low is, okay, this is my bottom rate. Like, I will not take less than this. Yeah. Check if your company is hiring. This is my favorite trick to find your market rate. We have seen so much movement with pay transparency laws in the past year. I'm not going to take credit, but we are seeing a lot of movement. And these laws are so important because they tell you, or they tell companies, you have to report the pay range for jobs that you're hiring for. Ding, ding, ding. If you work at that company, like in New York City, where the law says that they have to report that salary range, look on your company's site if they're hiring for a role exactly like yours or similar. The range is going to be listed. If you fall out of that range, you got to have a tough conversation with your manager because you're not being paid fairly. All right, the next one. Who here has ever negotiated their salary? Okay.
A few hands.
How did it go?
Yeah,
give me a sense. Thumbs up? Any lows? Okay, that's good. That's awesome. Salary negotiation is not something I look forward to. It's so difficult. It's really, what I describe it as is a power imbalance, right? When you're in a job interview, the person hiring you has a lot less to lose than you. You really want the job. And so one of the things we hear from a lot of women is that there's fear of negotiating their salary because they don't want to rock the boat. I feel that. I've been there before. You should not be afraid to rock the boat if it means getting paid what you deserve, because the opposite of that is getting paid what you should not be making, and it's a lot lower. You're going to kick yourself. So don't forget to advocate for yourself, period. I'll get off my stool. So we want to go through a little bit of a conversation guide because another thing we hear frequently is people don't know the words to use. They're not afraid to negotiate. It's just, how do you say it? What do you say? So this first guide is kind of an example of what happens in the beginning of a job interview. So this is like the first interview you have with a recruiter or hiring manager. If they ask you, what are your salary expectations? The number one thing to remember is based on negotiation research, negotiation voodoo, they say that the first person to throw a number out in any negotiation is usually the person that gets the shorter end of the stick. Don't ask me why. That's just science, okay? So if you're in this situation, try to avoid as much as you can being the first person to throw the number out. Instead, what you're going to say is, it's too early in the interview process for me to understand what the rate would be for this role. Would you mind sharing a budget with me? There's a ton of ways that you can frame this. Ask for a budget. That's the key word. And based on what we've seen with recruiters recently, they are more likely to answer it than they were a couple months ago because they know pay transparency laws are coming at them. They're on their heels, so they're going to start making those changes. If you haven't done this yet and you are comfortable in your job, try to take an interview anyway and try it out. It's a great way to test. I always tell people, even if you're comfortable in your role and somebody's like, hey, are you interested in this? Would you like to take an interview? Always say yes. Any time to practice these questions or your pitch or your strengths and weaknesses is an opportunity to improve yourself and keep doing it better and better. And how you answer those questions will also help you get a higher salary. So always say yes to an interview and practice these questions. The second option is if you're a little bit further in the interview process and salary hasn't come up yet. If they are like, here's your job offer, do you accept? You're going to say, based on my market research, specific skills and experience, my desired salary range is X to X. That's your range. But what you need to do is be a little bit more specific with the specific skills and experience. This is your opportunity to pitch yourself. You want this to be a home run. You want to say all the reasons why they should hire you and why they should pay you what you deserve. And that's going to go back to your factors, right, that we mentioned earlier. What skills do you bring to the table? Technical, soft, hard skills that you have that makes you a game changer for the role. What education? Did you get a master's degree, even though it's only required to have a bachelor's? You have extra education. Have you been doing this longer than what's required? Is it an entry-level role and you have 5 years of experience? We see that a lot. Mention it. Talk about yourself. This is the one opportunity I feel like where you should unabashedly brag about yourself. It's totally acceptable. So some tips and tricks. Go.
So the first tip, what you want to do is kind of ask for the top of your range. There's a reason behind this, and that is because if you ask for the top of your range, the worst that they can say is no. They might most likely counter offer with, hey, that's a little bit out of our budget, especially if it's a smaller company, but they will usually counter offer with, hey, we can afford this. Now, at that point, that's when you see whether or not that falls within your range. If it does and you feel as though that's a great, comfortable offer, accept it. If not, you can, by all means, step away, move to another interview, try out another job.
Yep. Next one. This goes back to the opportunity to brag about yourself. Prepare 2 to 3 strong talking points before any interview. I love remote interviews because I would always have my notebook right beside the laptop and I would like take a glance and be like, oh yeah, this point. Write it out, prepare it, speak it in front of the mirror. Get comfortable with bragging about yourself in this situation. You want to have those 2 to 3 strong talking points either beside you or in the back of your mind so that you can pull those out if there's ever any like hesitation about the salary you requested. And then you want to bring your sources and research. I think this is so important because having the sources and research is not only going to give you confidence, you're going to be able to say, I'm asking for this and I know I should because everybody else is making this in the market. It gives you that confidence to know this is what you deserve. You're not going to be shy. The best part about it is if you have your sources and research and you confidently know how much you should be making, it makes it so easy to walk away from a lowball offer. If you get something that's a little bit, what's the word, insulting, you can confidently walk away and be like, I know I deserve more. Not, well, maybe I can make it work. You know, I'll just be here for a year and then I'll move. No. You should be making what you should be making right now, not later. So this is so great for confidence. As someone who, I'm a people pleaser, I would always like hear a lowball offer and be like, yeah, you know, I think that I can make that work. I can make that work.
Yeah, I can work with that.
No, you want to get paid what you deserve. So have that research beside you. And then remember, if you don't negotiate your salary or ask for it, you're not going to get it. And most recruiters expect you to ask for more. They expect you to negotiate. That was something I didn't know until we started talking to recruiters. And they were like, yeah, like if they don't negotiate the salary, if they accept my first offer, I kind of don't think that they have a good understanding of the role. Like they're just desperate. You should negotiate that salary. The first offer they give you is not the last offer on the table. There's money on the table. So always negotiate it. If it's something amazing, like way higher than your market rate, first of all, I'd be like, what's the red flag? I would look at their like stock portfolio and be like, how is the economy looking for this company? Obviously pretty good if they're giving you good money, but that's the only situation. If it's way higher than what you've put in your range, accept it, no problem. If it's not, negotiate. Always negotiate. If you don't ask for it, you won't get it. Okay, this is the fun part. So we want to do kind of like an interactive salary transparency interview with you all and ask you all at once, everyone shout it out if you feel comfortable. What do you do? Cool. Excellent. I love that I can hear like random ones getting called out. I'm like, marketing? Okay. All right, the fun one. How much do you make?
1, 2, 3.
How did that feel?
I heard a little bit.
Thumbs up, down. How does it feel to talk about money? Uncomfortable? Shy? That's what we're working on.
Yeah, we'll get there.
That's why we're here. So one thing that I want to stress, to really stress the importance of talking about money, is that it's your right. It is protected by the National Labor Relations Act, and there's a couple caveats, which are like 1% of this group.
If you're a farmer, a railroad workers,
or federal worker, which is funny because federal workers already have transparent pay. Like, it's completely transparent, but they're not covered under this, weirdly. So, but they're not the problem because they already have this. So if you don't fall in that like 1% category, basically 99% of workers are covered by this. It is your legal right to talk about your salary. If your company presents you with an NDA and they're like, we don't talk about money here, not only if you've signed it and you didn't know any better, not only is that unenforceable. So if you talk about your salary and they're like, you signed an NDA, yeah, meet me in court. That's unenforceable. It's illegal. It's your right to talk about your salary, and you should.
With some exceptions, which are?
With some exceptions.
So you want to start by choosing the right environment. And what we mean by that is, yes, it's your right to talk about money, especially your money. It's not okay to do it on company time and or property.
We disagree, but it's a matter of if the company for any reason wants to retaliate against you. There are bad companies out there. Don't give them a reason to retaliate against you, because while they can't fire you for talking about your salary, they could say, oh, well, she talked about it during company time on company property. Things that you're not supposed to talk about at work. They could make a valid argument like that, and none of us have the money to take them to court, and we don't want to be in court for it anyway. So just remember that if you want to have these conversations with your colleagues, try to do it as intelligently as possible, meaning take your colleague out to coffee.
To a Capital One Café.
To Capital One Café. We talk about money here. Yeah, make sure that you're not doing it in front of managers. You know, any situation where you're like, if I should be, whispering, maybe take it outside, just for your own protection. The next one is to approach each conversation as an opportunity to educate yourself. So a lot of people will ask me, how do I bring this up to my colleague? I think I'm not making as much as they are. How do I ask them how much they make? Don't ask them how much they make. Tell them how much you make, and then ask them, did you negotiate your salary? Like, what did the interview process look like? If you take the first bullet and you're like, I'm going to be transparent, I'm going to show them that I'm open to this conversation by talking about my salary, that's a great way to introduce the topic, gauge how they feel, and don't force anyone into the conversation if they're not ready. But sometimes we've had people be uncomfortable, and then they come back after a night of thinking about it and talking with their families, and they're like, this is silly, I should have talked about this. So it may not happen overnight, but if you broach the subject, take some time, don't force anyone, put the ball in their court after being transparent first and foremost for yourself. The second part, or the third one, is to be aware of your own taboos. This is a really difficult conversation to have. It's not easy to talk about how much we make. There's a reason. There's a lot of taboo around this. It's not normalized. And so don't beat yourself up, first of all. If it's your first time having it and you're having a hard time, that's normal. It was really difficult for us as well. But also be aware that if you're looking at perhaps some of our videos and you're like, I don't think they should be making that much, it's important to be aware of our own taboos. And what I tell people is how much you make says absolutely nothing about your value in society or what you bring to the table. It's just a number. We all went to school or took a certification that put us in a category for a job field that we know how much it makes. Like, we shouldn't judge people for how much they make, what they do. Just be aware of your own taboos. Take some time. If you're realizing that you feel a type of way, combat it. Why do you feel that way? I think it's really important to just be aware and to ask ourselves those questions. But I did actually do a little bit of research to add on to what your rights are. In Massachusetts, did you all know that you guys have a pay transparency law in the works? Anybody? Ooh, okay. Not only does Massachusetts have an Equal Pay Act, which really reinforces the National Labor Relations Act, it says that equal pay for comparable work for all Massachusetts workers, which means workers or employers cannot prohibit their employees from asking about, or let me rephrase that. Employers cannot ask employees about their job history, which includes their salary history. So they can't say, how much were you making in a previous role? That's illegal, first and foremost. So if somebody asks you that in an interview, don't answer it and say, it's my right not to answer that. The second one, you are allowed to talk about salary in the workplace. That's actually protected by Massachusetts law. So not just the National Labor Relations Act. Massachusetts law, you all can talk about your salaries. Also, employers are supposed to provide equal pay for comparable work. So if you do find out that there's an unexplainable pay gap between you and a colleague in a similar role, that's illegal in the state's law. So make sure that you're aware. If you find that out, you can report them to your state's probably labor group with the Senate and all that. Make sure that you're advocating for yourself if you find that out. But the exciting bill that's in the works right now, it actually was introduced on January 19th, and there's a hearing scheduled for it on May 9th, so lots of movement happening, so keep an eye out. It's called the House Docket 2814. It's been amended, so now it's called Bill S 1191. They could have chose a really fun name. I don't know why they chose all the numbers, but it's requiring that businesses with 15 or more employees, and this is full-time and part-time employees, not just full-time, they must disclose in job advertisements and postings salary ranges. They must also present what the pay range is to an employee or an applicant upon request. So if you apply to a job and they meet the requirement, 15 plus employees, you can ask them outright, what is the pay range for this role? That's their responsibility to answer it. If you are working for a company and this law hopefully passes, you'll also be able to ask your company what the pay range is for your role immediately. So market research 101. You can also, companies are also supposed to disclose pay range if an employee is offered a promotion or a transfer, and to employees upon request. So really exciting stuff. I think we're seeing great movement for pay transparency. It would be so much easier if we could get a federal law in the works, and we're trying we're trying to push the needle forward, but just be aware of what the laws are in your own state, because there are protections there that are meant to keep you well paid and keep an equal environment as well. And that is all we have. So as I mentioned, the market research guide in your guys' goodie bag has so much information. We put together a 5-page guide with information about market research, basically answering any kind of question you have. Yeah, so we're gonna go through some questions now that you all have put together, and then if we don't answer anything and we still have more, please feel free to raise your hand. Also, while we're going through these, if you have questions, raise your hand. It's a conversation.
Okay. I recently found out a coworker with less experience was offered a higher salary for my position. What is the correct way to approach this?
Worst case scenario. I'm so sorry, whoever that is. It sucks. It's not an enviable position to be in, and it's really difficult. I feel like it's unfair when that happens, because it puts a lot of responsibility on you to fix the solution instead of the employer, raising your salary and making it fair. The best way to go about this, you have to be careful, because depending on how you found out what your colleague makes, could or could not get you in trouble. So you want to be careful, because there is a little bit of a law that you're not, unless if you are HR and you're in charge of everybody's salaries, you're not supposed to disclose it. And if you find out, what someone else's salary is, you can't go around the office telling other people's salaries. You can only talk about your own. So you have to be tactful about how you approach them. But I would go directly to my manager, and I would put together a formal letter, so that there's proof. That's another thing. If you find yourself in this situation, or you find yourself underpaid, put together a letter. Explain why you think you're underpaid, the market research behind it, put your sources in there. We're back in college, we're doing Works Cited. You want to be able to have that. And more so what it is it's a paper trail, right? Because your manager is going to be like, how do we brush this under the rug as quickly as we can? How do we make this not our problem? If you have a piece of paper that you have emailed them, it's on the record. HR has it. It's your best protection. It shows that you demonstrated knowledge and you followed up on it. If it comes down to a lawsuit, that's your best protection. So I highly recommend that's what you do. But go to your manager, put together this formal letter. If you can tactfully explain how you found out your colleague makes more than you, whether they told you, it would also be helpful to recruit their help. If they're an ally to you, it's better to put two heads together and go together than to go by yourself. So try to recruit their help and be like, hey, I found out you're making way more than me. I'm actually making X, and I'm going to ask for a raise. Do you mind coming with me to X manager and supporting me in my request? There we go.
All right, next question. What are some ways you can advocate for yourself when you're told you make a lot for your age and don't have data to advocate?
Don't have data to advocate. First of all, no apologies, people. We don't apologize for how much we make. You make what you make probably because of the size of the company and your role and the importance of it. You don't have to apologize for that. You don't have to feel guilty. You shouldn't. Be proud. Having a high salary and talking about it is not boasting. I feel like there's a lot of misconception there that if you make a lot and then you talk about it, people are like, wow, she's bragging. Like, she shouldn't be talking about that. There's ways to talk about your salary and not come across as braggy. The best way, I would say, is to put the number out there, but then position yourself as a source to help others. Be like, this is how much I make. I make X if it shocks people. Okay, great. What questions do you have for me? Ask me what I did. How did I get up there? How did I negotiate? It's a great opportunity to position yourself as an ally for others instead of someone who's the far end of the room, high earner, sticks out like a sore thumb.
What suggestions do you have for salary negotiation for those with limited work experience?
I would say just start practicing. Limited work experience doesn't mean that you can't negotiate. We've all been negotiating since we were kids, right? Bedtime a little bit later, staying out with our friends a little bit later. Everything's a negotiation. Start practicing with your friends and family. Be like, hey, I don't really know how to do this. I don't have much work experience. Ask a friend. I want to start negotiating my salary. I have no idea how. Find a friend who has work experience or one who doesn't. Just start practicing with them. There's really no excuse to not do it. The scripts are so simple. You just have to say them. That's the hardest part, is overcoming that barrier of really shyness.
What kind of advice do you have for someone who is just starting their career, who has a lot of student debt? And what is the best way to save money while paying back debt?
Student loan debt. I get that. I graduated with student loans, and I was so annoyed by them, for lack of a better word, that I just made it my entire life's mission after I graduated to pay them off as soon as I can. My biggest piece of advice is don't stress, but make a plan. Having a plan is the best way to ease anxiety. So have a budget. If you don't already have one, put one together. Make sure you know how much every single month you have to do minimum on your loan, the minimum requirement. Always add a little sprinkle dinkle extra. That's what I did, because it'll help with interest payments at the end. So just have a plan, have a budget. Also talk about it. Talking about student loans with your friends, it's easier to feel less alone, or it's easy to feel alone when you're straddled with so much debt. Most of us have it. A lot of people have it. When we ask people on the street if they have student loan debt, they almost always say yes, and many of them have over $50K plus in debt.
6 figures of student loan debt.
So don't feel alone. A lot of people are in this position as well. So it's best to talk about it. I feel like once we can talk about things, we'll all be on the same page and feel less alone. So have those conversations. Also, one thing that I've remembered, one of the ways that I paid off my student loan debt, just a little trick, when I changed, I job hopped a lot, which is how I increased my salary. Yeah. One of the things that I did, and I only recommend this if you plan on staying with a company for at least a year, negotiate a sign-on bonus. So I negotiated a $5,000 sign-on bonus at one of my companies. It was taxed, yeah, oy vey, but it was still like $3,500. I slapped that immediately on my student loans. Stayed with the company a year, because if you leave, they usually make you pay it back if you leave within a year. But if you find a company that you really like, you're like, I want to stay here for at least a year, negotiate a sign-on bonus, $5K, $10K. If they can't meet you at the range, negotiate other things. There's so many things you can negotiate. Work-life balance, flexibility, benefits, cost for your computer, Wi-Fi, commuting, cell phone, sign-on bonus. That's a great way to get hard money right away. Slap it on your student loans. Just a tip.
What is the average percentage salary bump you will receive by moving companies, and is moving around every few years viewed negatively by hiring teams.
That's a great segue. Yeah. We can both touch on it. We were both job hoppers, so we're very familiar with the, does it make you look bad?
Yeah, so within 5 years, I cycled through 5 different companies, and it just became like a normal thing. For me, what I looked for was a $10,000 to $15,000 salary increase for every job. And a lot of the times we heard the same thing, oh, all of these jobs on your record is going to look terrible. I didn't plan on staying at the same job for more than a year. So if a company wants to interview you knowing your job history, it's because they don't really care what your job history is. How can you benefit that company, and does your years of experience actually translate over?
Yeah, so if you stay with a company, usually, and actually, when I found out I was underpaid and I tried to get a raise, what they told me was, you have to be with the company at least a year before you can get a raise. And even then, they didn't give out raises of more than 3 to 5% at any one time, which is what we have seen in most of our companies. If you stay there, the raise you're going to get is probably going to be between like 1 to 5%. It's not going to be much higher, but if you job hop, we saw raises, we would try to do at least like 10 to 20K more. I would recommend get 20% more than what you're currently making. Just make it worth your while, but don't do what we did, which is not doing market research. If that 10 to 20K, if you get more, that's great. Does it fall in your market rate? If it doesn't, you got to add more money. You have to be making your market rate. That's the most important. That's Bible. We stick by that. And then make sure it's a little bit extra every time you hop. What was the other thing? Oh yeah, so stigma with job hopping. There is a stigma. People talk about it. I had one job where I got a lot of flack for it, but that was when I was trying to quit the job I was underpaid at, and I planned on staying there longer, but yada yada, I found out I was underpaid and I left. That was the only place ever that I've had any issue with someone, looking at my job history and being like, is she loyal? Loyalty's out the window. We lived through the pandemic. Like, we don't care about loyalty anymore. We care about being happy where we work and being fairly compensated. That's what should be like your guiding North Star. And so don't worry about what other people are saying. If you're not happy where you're working, if you don't feel like you're fairly paid, leave. The right company will look past job history, flukes, and they won't care. They're hiring you for a reason. And also, if they give you an interview, they want to hire you. There's a reason. They're not wasting their time. So don't worry about it. Don't stress about it. The number one thing I would say is just have an excuse, an explanation ready that you have practiced in the mirror a couple times. Mine was always, which is funny, it was true. Whenever I would do an interview and people were like, you didn't stay very long at this job. Like, why did you leave? I'm looking for a place where I can have positive impact, and I don't think I have that here. Now I have it.
Yeah. Mine's was I wasn't being utilized to my full potential.
Steal it. Write it down.
Yeah, steal those.
You don't have to tell the truth. You could just skirt.
All right. You find out that you're being paid less than another coworker. How should you go about asking for a raise or more money?
I think we talked about this a little bit, but if you can recruit your friend or your colleague as an ally, definitely something you can do. It helps. Put together that letter. Write your sources, your market research, explaining exactly how you know what you should be making, what you're making now, and how that doesn't compare, and then back it up with really strong talking points about what did you bring to the company, what value do you bring to the team, what positive impact have you had. All of that is going to help you in your argument.
Do you think people factor in evolving expenses when negotiating salaries, such as childcare, and how do we do this better?
That's a really great question. Evolving
We've
expenses.
Never had that one before.
Haven't had that one yet. And you know what? I'll be honest. I never thought about evolving expenses. I mean, we're also dinks, double income, no kids. But that's important. I would say that you can always negotiate more than money anytime. You can negotiate your benefits, all of that. That's something you should ask them about. And I bet you'll take them aback too, but it shows that, I think that's a great question to ask, because it'll show that you're looking long term with this company. If you're talking about evolving benefits, as a recruiter, I'd be like, oh shoot, she's going to stay here through kids. Like, hell yeah, like that sounds great. Companies want loyalty. It's one of the things they're looking for. It's more expensive to hire an employee than it is to raise an employee to their current, what they should be making. So definitely ask. Be like, hey, do you guys have a system for evolving benefits? Or just talk about it yourself. Be like, I plan on expanding my family and my salary does matter to support that. Is there an evolving, structure?
how do I figure out what people at my level are making when interviewing for a specific company so that I'm not underpaid?
Yeah. So market research, market research, market research. Those 3 to 5 sources. Also, shameless self-promotion. We have an online database. It's completely anonymous. We have over 5,000 salaries recorded there. Definitely check that out. It's on that little postcard you guys have. So that's a great place to do some research. Find out people with the same job title. Try to find those people in your area with your level of expertise, your education, all of that. Any factor you can find that positions their salary closer to yours to give you an estimate of what you should be making, just go 3 pages deep in Google. It's out there.
Last question. Is there a workaround to asking coworkers their salary in my company that advises against it / is not allowed?
Yeah, so reverse psychology, right? So don't ask them how much they make. Tell them how much you make, and that you're having a couple concerns in the back of your mind about whether or not you think you're fairly paid. Tell them about how the interview process went. If there's anything to back up your story and positioning where you are now, give them that information. Then you put the ball in their court. It's their right to not discuss their salary with you if they don't want to, and we can't take that personally. A lot of people, it's a difficult conversation. It's also very difficult for different generations, so we have to have empathy. If you've been drilled this your entire life, 40 plus years, it's going to be a lot harder for those people to understand the value versus someone straight out of college who immediately pay transparency benefited them. So come at it from a position of empathy and understanding. Put your number out there first, and then see what they do. Let them mull it over, but have these conversations for sure.
Any last questions? Just want to make sure that all of you have gotten your opportunities. Perfect.
I think it's the one.
Yep.
You all have any regrets about your process, or at any point where you're like, damn, I should have stayed with that company?
So the company that she actually mentioned, my last company that I was getting paid $112 at. Great benefits. I had free medical. Dental was $5 a month. Free vision. A lot of time off. Great work-life balance. So I wouldn't necessarily say I regret leaving them, but that was definitely a great company. And I actually pushed one of my friends over to that company, and now he works there. So
I would say, for legal reasons, I can't get into one of the regrets. But for salary transparency in and of itself, we're just constantly learning, that education is key, and you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of times we learn from our mistakes. And as new creators, there's a lot to learn. We're not from the creator world, so it's a lot. And one of the things we learned the hard way is agents, and working with partnerships. And we were taken advantage of very early on. I can't get into details for legal reasons, but yeah, I would say that no matter what you're doing, always ask for a second opinion, talk about things. If you ever get kind of like an icky feeling, like you're talking to a recruiter and you're like, what, there's just something, I don't know. Trust your gut. Always trust your gut. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you have a question, guaranteed someone else in the room has the same question. So don't be afraid to ask stupid questions, because it could save you a lot of money or make you a lot of money.
This isn't a question, but more of a response to the evolving benefits for families. I did a co-op at a company here in Boston last fall, and I was working with HR and recruiting, and I was just blown away by the number of benefits that there were, from healthcare and in terms of family benefits. They paid for kids' schooling, and they helped with adoption and egg freezing, sperm donation, They had this service where if you had to breastfeed, they would then deliver your milk to your child wherever they were. So I don't know if other people work at companies where this is typical, but for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to try and work here in the future. So I think nothing is off the table. Clearly, if people are going, adoption is really expensive. So there are a lot of options out there. So.
Absolutely. I love that you brought that up, because I think a lot of people think compensation, they just see salary, what are you making every 2 weeks or whatever. your compensation should be, look at it as total compensation, because those benefits are, they have value, right? They bring a lot to the table. You having universal healthcare, basically, like free healthcare, was a game changer. It was,
Oh yeah,
it
I
was
got
really difficult to
every
leave.
checkup I could.
Yeah, seriously. And $5 a month for dental, it was great. Those things really matter. And sometimes, you know, if you're getting a great benefit, like your commuting is taken care of, you have free childcare, universal health care, things like that, it can make the salary that you're taking home appear less, but your balanced lifestyle is really what matters. Like, I remember whenever I was looking for a salary, I would look at it as, I need to have money if I break my arm, you know, and I don't go bankrupt at the hospital because I didn't have great health care. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Remember, you can, if the salary doesn't look great, what other things can you negotiate? You know, bring up healthcare, childcare, commuting, all of that. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, and with smaller companies, a lot of the times if they can't compete with the bigger companies, what they would
They'll
do
make it up
is,
with them.
yeah, they'll fill up that package with benefits. So a lot of the times, if you get offered a smaller salary than what you were expecting, just ask.
You can also negotiate a higher 401k match, you know, so long-term investment, you know, higher than 3%. If you can get 6%, it's great. Any
Hi.
questions?
How do I negotiate my salary when applying for a job in a completely different field?
Ooh, a completely different field. Market research. So if you're coming at it in a completely different field, basically ask yourself, what experience can I bring? Because if you're starting in a brand new field, that doesn't mean that you're starting at 0 years of experience, right? You still have your total years of experience. Make sure you mention that. You're not new to this. You know, you have work experience under your belt. But what skills are transferable from your last job? You know, so communication or any technical skills. Make sure to mention that, because first of all, you're going to want to look at what you should be making with like the years of experience, entry level, things like that for that role, but you want to back it up with like the things that you bring to the table. So definitely advocate for yourself. Be like, based on my market research, I know that I should be making X and X. I'm new to this career field, but guess what? I have these skills that are totally transferable. And I worked on this project where I got really excited about this career field, and that's why I want to work here with you. You know, you want to talk a big game.
Also, numbers, whenever it comes to your talking points, if you can somehow get across a quantitative
An X percentage.
Yeah, it goes a lot further than you going, hey, like, I helped change this or I helped change that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of companies look for numbers.
Yeah, like, is there any way that you can quantify, you know, boosting revenue or productivity, or if you're greeting people, you know, like, I increased the energy in our store, you know, anything that will help you out in that role, bring it. It doesn't matter if it's a different field. We all have transferable skills, and there's a reason that you're going into that field. You're good at it. So advocate for yourself.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, first off, thank all of you for attending.
Yeah,
we really
thank
appreciate it. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, everyone.